Considered necessary in explicit terms to preserve from invasion by federal officials the right of the parent to the custody and care of his child and the sanctity of his home, shows how far-reaching are the powers which were intended to be granted by the ACT. 1. The act is invalid because it assumes powers not granted to Congress and usurps the local police power. McCulloch versus Maryland for wheat. 316, 405, United States versus Cruikshank, 92 U.S. 542, 549 to 551. In more recent cases, however, the court has shown that there are limits to the power of Congress to pass legislation purporting to be based on one of the powers expressly granted to Congress, which in fact usurps the reserved powers of the states. And that laws showing on their face detailed regulations of matter wholly within the police power of the states will be held to be unconstitutional, although they purport to be passed in the exercise of some constitutional power. Hammer versus Dagenhart. 247,259 U.S.4 The Act is not made valid by the circumstances that federal powers are to be exercised only with respect to those states which accept the Act, for Congress cannot assume, and state legislatures cannot yield, the powers reserved to the states by the Constitution. President Monroe, May 4, 1822. 2. The act is invalid because it imposes on each state an illegal option either to yield a part of its powers reserved by the 10th Amendment 10 or to give up its share of appropriations under the act. A statute attempting, by imposing conditions upon a general privilege, to exact a waiver of a constitutional right is null and void. Harrison versus St. Louis and San Francisco R.R. Company, 232 U.S. 318. Terrell versus Burke Construction Company, 257 U.S. 529. 3. The act is invalid because it sets up a system of government by cooperation between the federal government, a corporation 6, and certain of the states, not provided by the Constitution. Congress cannot make laws for the states, and it cannot delegate to the states the power to make laws for the United States. In Raybrer, 140 U.S. 545, Knickerbocker Ice Company versus Stewart, 253 U.S. 149. Opinion of the Justices, 239 Massachusetts 606. The maternity ACT was eventually repealed, but parts of it have been found in other legislative acts. What this ACT attempted to do was to set up government by appointment, run by bureaucrats with redelegated authority to tax, which is in itself unconstitutional. What was once declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of this nation in the past should be upheld in a court challenge today. The Constitution has not changed. What has changed is the way this government views human life. Today we are defined as human resources believed to be owned by the government. The government now wants us as individuals to be tagged and tracked. Government-mandated or legislated national ID, which is unconstitutional. Federal jurisdiction to legislate for the several states does not exist and could never survive a court challenge as shown above. Writing letters to elected public servants will not save us when we all know their agenda does not include serving those who place them in power, servitude. Perhaps the 10th Amendment 10 of the federal Constitution guaranteeing states' rights will, if challenged, when making it known that we as individuals of the several states will not be treated as chattel of the U.S. government. If the federal government believes that they own us and as such have the right to demand national ID cards and health ID cards, which will in truth tag us as we tag our animals, then let them bring forth the documents to prove their authority to legislate for it. If our God-given rights to life, liberty, freedom, and pursuit of happiness, which were the foundation upon which this nation was created, do not exist, and liberty and freedom is only an illusion under which the American people suffer, then let the government of this nation come forward and tell the people. But if we are judged free, then we should not have to plead or beg before our elected public servants to be treated as such. If, in truth, we are not free, then perhaps it is our duty to address this issue forthright and forthwith with the power of the pen, and pray the people will awaken from their fear and slumber induced by greed. How much are you worth to the corporation? The fraud takes place in the registration process. Register means to abandon, by joinder from private to public. Engage, auto financing, credit cards, utilities, corporate government, courts. Fraud is committed upon every child born in the United States. 1. All names on birth certificates are traded on bonds, security pools, and are certificates of financial nature without disclosure to the issuer you and your mother/father. Court cases, etc., are traded on bonds of the denationalized Aboriginal and denationalized national of the various republics of the world who learned their free society structure from the ancient indigenous peoples. The corporate citizen is a victim of the force and duress actions of corporate agencies, etc., through fraud. If at all possible, never voluntarily go to court. Live men and women are never meant to be in a place designed for the business of fictional entities. When we attend court, we are deemed dead. They can only deal with legal fictions/trusts. Court is for titled persons, judges, prosecutors, defendants, bailiffs, clerks, cops, and attorneys. Live men and women are not recognized in court. They are not persons, corporations. Social Security and tax monies are traded domestically and internationally. This is chattel fraud, but cannot be properly remedied until cancellation of adverse contracts and claims in recoupment, reparations, international law UN 6147, etc. Finding the fraud by account numbers, CUSIP. 2. The CUSIP search service found here provided by the writer gets the identification number of all account numbers, including court cases, whether municipal, state, or federal, all birth certificate numbers, all social security numbers, EIN numbers, and CUSIP numbers on social security cards, all mortgage accounts, auto financing account numbers, credit card account numbers, utility account numbers, etc. To show that the Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people who were forced to be corporate citizens of the United States without reserving their Aboriginal nationality or nationality in the various republics have been unlawfully and fraudulently denationalized, and they have been made into state chattel collateral goods/property and goods of the United States incorporated through identity theft and identity fraud, acts of denationalization, commercial fraud, and acts of genocide. This stands true for non-Aboriginals who declare themselves to be nationals of the various republics guaranteed for the United States of America in the Constitution, and also stands true internationally. Now you know why everyone who does business with you wants your Social Security number to pass the debt on to the Department of Treasury Bureau of Public Debt. http://www.treasurydirect.gov. It is all fraud on every contract since the birth certificate. 3. This information proves that all birth certificates are financial instruments created through commercial fraud without proper disclosure. All court cases are based on underlying bonds, the bid bond, the payment bond, and the performance bond. So the court compromises its judicial duty for economic and commercial fraud and treason to foreign creditors in violation of the Constitution for the United States of America, and all Social Security cards bear a CUSIP number that identifies your bond. With the United States Incorporated, which is forced upon Aboriginals and nationals of the Republic through threat, duress, economic sanctions, and contractual fraud. 4. Yes, you are a voluntary slave, not in violation of the 13th Amendment. It was never disclosed to you that you have volunteered because the actions are actions of fraud, denationalization, and genocide of all Americans, Aboriginals, and non-Aboriginals. This was done unknowingly by you and your mother, and as an infant through your commercially fraudulent financial trust agreement with the federal government of the United States Incorporated and other entities. This activity unlawfully funds the genocide of Aboriginal peoples and nationals of the Republic and stand at last as acts of treason. Definition of fraud: a perversion of the truth to induce a person to part with something valuable, rights, property, etc., belonging to them using false or misleading representations. Domestic definition of genocide in United States. USC Title 18, Section 1091, A. Basic offense. Whoever, whether in time of peace or